From Oblivion, my experiences in the void of dogma, in search of enlightenment. This is a picture by George Catlin. He's one of my favorite painters, and I really like this painting because it really captures the essence of North Dakota, I feel. And I'm going to talk about my experiences growing up really isolated in North Dakota. This was my farm. It was located kind of close to the reservation, and the people around it didn't even speak English. They all spoke German still. Probably the craziest things that happened on the farm were me getting chased by pigs, a dog maiming me basically, ripping a big chunk out of my arm, and I still have the scars, and also cows like walking right up to the front door and dying because when I lived on this farm, there was a big drought going on. Okay, so this red area right there is Sioux County, and that's kind of where my farm was. It was right on the Cannonball River, which is on the border with Morton County, and this area was very religious, very isolated. A lot of the people there didn't even speak English. They like spoke some Native American language or they spoke German, and it was a place that was really hard to grow up in because there was always drought and there was always blistering heat in the summer and freezing cold winters. And I think that just created this atmosphere of kind of feeling as though you're battling to stay alive against the elements and nobody's your friend, not even nature, and like the only thing you can turn to is God. This painting is called Night Hunt by John Brojo, and it captures the two elements that were really awesome about growing up in this area. It was exciting because there were these coyotes and cougars and rattlesnakes that made life here dangerous. So you always had to be careful because man wasn't necessarily at the top of the food chain. There were coyotes fighting for dominance over you. Or cougars, they would sneak up. They were so quiet, and that was really scary to think about. And then a rattlesnake's one bite and you're gone. But also there were those who died before you, the ghosts of the prairie. There were all of these ghost stories that were really, really scary. And I remember being just horrified as a kid by these ghost stories. When I moved to the city, I noticed some key differences. In the country, life was viewed through the filter of death. You were always competing to stay alive, whether it was with the drought, the carnivorous animals and poisonous animals that were everywhere. Life in the country was kind of suffering. You had to sacrifice pretty much everything to your family, and the idea of religion was appeasing God so you can avoid hell. And also in the country, racism and all these other undesirable ideas got passed on through the family, and the difference between the country and the city, in the city we there was no talk of death. Death was taboo, and you kind of pretended like it wasn't there. And the city life was just fun. It wasn't suffering, and you didn't really have to sacrifice anything. There was all this narcissism and vanity. Religion was supposed to be fun and cool somehow, which really didn't make sense to me coming from the country because religion was like a serious thing for my family, and the big focus was death, and religion was like downplaying all of that. Racism, sexism, homophobia, and other undesirable ideas were kind of reinforced in the school system, in the government in cities, I thought, instead of being passed on through the family. So it was almost like this civilization of hate. I spent the rest of my life in Bismarck, and the thing that makes me the most upset about this place is that they try to make it seem like, and when I say they, I mean the school system and the government there, they try to make it seem like the only way you can be normal is if you're white, if you're Christian, and if you're straight. And that's not the America I know. Especially this area, it's so culturally diverse with the Native Americans, with the Germans from Russia, with the Scandinavians, and then all these incoming new peoples, the African Americans and the Asian Americans, all these new people coming in. I just felt like they weren't welcoming for change. They wanted to keep it almost this, they wanted to keep everything so close minded, and they really clung on to those racist ideas. And it just made me really upset because Bismarck is a lot more than that. My family was a little bit diverse. As you could see on the left, that's my cousin Shelby, and she's white. And she's going to represent my rural German from Russia side of the family who were very, very devoutly Catholic. Um, the their ancestors spoke German, and even my grandma and grandpa spoke German. And my cousin on the right represents the other big influence on my family, which was Native American culture. So, just having some Native American family members really exposed me to Native American culture, like powwows, their language, and religion. And I thought that was really interesting. And I also thought the other side of my family was interesting, the Catholic German side. So, kind of a fusion of cultures. After being isolated for so long, being in high school and having the opportunity to meet all these people and talk with them about the ideas I had been having for so long and have fun and do all these cool things like go swimming and go shopping, go dancing together, and experience different cultures and different opinions on the meaning of life. I think that was something that I really enjoyed about living in the city. As a kid, I found it absolutely astounding the diversity of the world. And even if you look on a globe or a map, you see just how small the state of North Dakota is compared to everything else. And you see all of the different countries, and like even like this illustrated atlas, it shows like all these pictures. So that really got me thinking to all the different possibilities that there are in the world. I started, and as I started reading encyclopedias, I started to think about all the different people and all the different languages. Sakakawea is definitely my favorite historical figure and someone who I was really inspired by. Her ability to understand more than one language was the whole reason that Lewis and Clark were able to have such a successful mission. And this idea of North Dakota before it was sort of transformed into this whole other world, the way North Dakota was before Europeans mutated it, was so beautiful to me. All the different uh, Native American tribes and the buffalo or the bison, I'm sorry, the bison going all across just vast oceans of land without any trees. It was just such a beautiful thought to me. And I think Sakakawea is really the embodiment of this thought of just freedom and power and diversity before everything got mutated into this big white blob of homogeneous. You have to be white, you have to be Christian, you have to be straight. That's not how North Dakota was originally. Originally, North Dakota was very diverse. It was there were a lot of languages being spoken. It wasn't just English, and there were a lot of religions, and I think that's what really fascinates me the most about North Dakota is the way it was before. I'm just going to be brutally honest and say that regardless of all the friends I made, regardless of all the things I learned, school was absolutely traumatizing at times, especially being the only gay kid at a Catholic school. It was really hard when even the teachers are against you, the principals are against you, all the students are against you. except for the few friends you have. In school, I remember parents would tell me that they didn't want me around their kids. I would get hate letters, and the students would call me a fag, and just all this sketchy stuff happening to me, like getting threatened with a razor in an art class by this really, I want to call him a hick, but he wasn't really a hick. He was more like a wannabe hick because I consider myself a hick because I grew up on a farm in the middle of nowhere, but this kid lived in the city his whole life, so I don't really know what to call him. Anyway, regardless, he really had a problem with me and he said that he was going to drag me behind his pickup truck. That was absolutely horrifying. And it was also really scary going to the bathroom. It was scary changing the locker room. And again, it was because my school wasn't standing up to all this racism, homophobia, this idea that you can be different. It wasn't really encouraged. They wanted everyone to believe that you had to be the same. And that's why school was so traumatizing at times. Okay, regardless of all that hate I got, I it didn't stop me at all from being who I wanted to be. I was very flamboyantly weird. I enjoyed acting. I enjoyed freaking out at volleyball games when my friends were losing. I enjoyed wearing wigs, and me and my friends were always experimenting with makeup, getting ready for Halloween. I've always been a really musical person. As a kid, I played the piano, the organ, the drums. In high school, I learned the clarinet, the saxophone, and the guitar. And music was just such a wonderful way to let out all of those emotions, all of that rage, all of that depression, and kind of express all of that anger at being denied being part of the group. And I think all of the greatest musicians have that same feeling that they're the black sheep in a flock of white sheep. I really liked taking photos of my friends and going out into nature and experiencing everything and documenting it all. I love to experiment with my camera. I hung out with a lot of smokers and I love to photograph the smoke. I love to photograph the sunrise and light when it's different colors is really fun to photograph too. I didn't really like to escape into the fantasy of things that weren't my own culture or my family's culture until I went to go see Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban in the IMAX. And there was this really freaky wolf, and it scared me to death. And it really excited me about chapter books and writing, and it sort of shifted me away from music and art, which I'd been into, and pushed me into writing. And then I focused all of my efforts on writing because of this movie. And then, of course, I did read the books. I really connected with Victor Frankenstein because he wants to know everything. And that was so me. I was always reading all the encyclopedias, studying every single centimeter on the map because I wanted to make sure I knew everything. And I really understood why Victor wanted to create life. It's just to know. And I think Frankenstein exposes the horror of knowing everything and being able to play the role of God. I hope it's become clear by now that my favorite type of writing is horror, and that's because my family was always telling ghost stories, and so when I got to chapter books, I just wanted to read horror because it was the most exciting, and Stephen King does it the best. Carrie is awesome because it exposes why being a teenager is definitely the scariest thing of all time. And Salem's Lot is probably the scariest book I've ever read. I have nightmares about reading this book. It's it's definitely one of the best vampire novels of all time, and it just really captures the essence of fear of death and fear of Satan, because I grew up in such a Catholic household that the biggest fear was Satan. And the way Stephen King connects vampires to this idea of Satan and just the battle between good and evil, it's just flawless. The Exorcist and The Silence of the Lambs are my two favorite movies for two different reasons. The Exorcist is amazing because it captures that fear of the devil that's so deeply ingrained in my brain, especially after going to Catholic school my whole life and having such a religious family. The Exorcist is just undeniably, like unquestionably, the most horrific thing I've ever seen in film. But on the other hand, The Silence of the Lambs, there's no supernatural elements at all. It's all what humans can do. And it you're not Satan isn't your enemy at all. Your enemy is other people. And that's also really horrifying. That you can't trust someone who's your own kind. The most fun I've ever had was at my first job, which was at a haunted house. And working at a haunted house is a great way to release your creative impulses. And acting is really improv. It's all improv, so it's just so fun. Uh, some of the funny things in haunted houses, like scary clowns and scary corn, like you can see here. Um, the thing I like the most about haunted houses is that you're in the story and you're it's not like a play, because a play there's a wall dividing you. In haunted houses you break through that wall and you kind of experience this feeling that you need to survive and that something really bad could happen to you, and it's just really it's funny at times, it's scary at times, it's stupid at times, and so is life. And that's why I really had a fun time working at haunted houses, especially this one. Bjork is my favorite singer, and the reason why I connect with her so much is because she came from Iceland and she was really isolated just like me, and the way she perceives the world has had an enormous impact over me. Like the way she experiences relationships and the way she describes love and the way she describes everything, it's it just makes so much sense. Like humans and the way they act is so, like being in a relationship, for example, it's so amazing, but it's also so frustrating. The way she presents herself artistically is um unapologetically weird, unapologetically herself. And that's how I have come to feel about myself. I'm not ashamed to be gay. I'm not ashamed to be a little bit weird. I'm not ashamed to like the things I like. And I think that's because of the way Bjork is. And the way I would experience her music was always like by myself walking out in the countryside with just me and her. It was like we were having a conversation. And whenever I'd watch her music videos, they were just each works of art and such high quality, just everything I want to be as an artist, everything I want to be as a musician, everything I want to be as a writer. It's all like in her. Aphex Twin is another musician that has really had a huge impact over me because he doesn't use words to get all these feelings and emotions across. He just uses his sounds, and his sounds like wash over you like an ocean, and you're in his like world. And I think the way he uses music to create worlds is really inspiring and has also had an influence over me because I'll just listen to his music and write. And it's fun because it's just like riding a roller coaster on his when you're listening to his songs. This is my family right here, my siblings, and I'm very protective of them. I'm not protective just for their safety. I'm also very protective of their minds. Like I want to save them from becoming closed-minded. I want them to be open to diversity, and I want them to see that North Dakota isn't just a place where you have to be a white straight man or a very like modest woman to be respected. You can be anything at all and gain respect. And I've always tried to in, engrave that feeling into my siblings. I want them to respect people. I want them to know that North Dakota is such a diverse place. The experience of feeling very protective of all four of my siblings has led me to want to be a teacher. And that was fueled even more by my experiences in school because I know what it's feel like when the teacher isn't on your side, when he's kind of joining in with the students and making fun of you. And as a teacher, I want to fight bullying and promote an acceptance of diversity and tolerance, even if for some reason, if your religion is against someone, someone's sexuality, against anything about a person, if that's the way your culture is, if that's the way your religion is, I don't see why we can't at least treat each other like human beings and tolerate each other. And I think schools should be trying to promote this idea of equality and acceptance and tolerance instead of this other idea of everyone needs to be the same and you're only okay if you're a white straight man or a very modest girl. And I also want to make school exciting like I see these teachers are. I think my personality, I'm just so weird. I just can't wait to find out what my students will think of me. In the future, my dream is to open, well, first I want to teach, but then I want to found my own school where there's a big focus on bilingual education. Like, I want there to be I want my students to be fluent in more than one language, and I want them to be really open minded and aware of just how colorful and diverse the world is. And I just can't wait to make my dream a reality.